Um, Lots to cover, man. Uh, let's go over a couple. Let's go over a couple of cool things because you just at the time that we're recording this, um, you did share on Instagram that there's again just been positive movement with your treatments. Again, being realistic and realizing it, but like good, good progress. Share with the listeners what's going on there.
Yeah, so I think I've shared this before. When this first all started back in December of last year, my counts in my blood for the type of cancer I have was over 4,000. So I put myself on a very restrictive diet. When they finally isolated the type of cancer I had was in December, beginning of January. They started me on chemo. By that time, I was at 1,000, a little over 1,000. So a huge drop just in diet alone. And then as of this past week, my number, which is CA919, it's if you want to look it up, it was at 97.
Outstanding.
It's been coming down steadily. Below 37 is normal for people.
Yeah.
Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm completely cancer free, but things are still progressing. I finished my first round of 12 chemo treatments. They've removed the one chemo drug that causes the neuropathy. Unfortunately, I've got some neuropathy, but hopefully it won't get any worse.
Right.
It should hopefully get a little bit better. And now I'm in maintenance mode.
Okay.
So
Okay.
it's
Uh,
working and we'll keep going at it.
yeah. And yeah, how is and just really the side effects, the main side effects for you have been the neuropathy,
Yeah.
um, not really, not really much of the hair loss, not really much of the nausea, you know?
Yeah. It's all, I do take nausea meds during my week of chemo, but I don't need them the week after, as some people do.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing, man. What a
God is
huge,
good.
what a huge blessing. So, yeah, so your dad came down to visit while all this is going on too, right? While you're getting this
It,
news. How'd
it
that
was
visit go?
nice. My sister called me and let me know he's only staying for a few days. He told my sister before he left, I just need to be in a room with Doug and see him again.
Yeah, right.
And we just had such a good visit. He and his wife Pat and Pat's dog Harvey. We just had a good 3 4 days together and made the most of it.
When was the last time that you'd seen them?
It would have been last year, probably early fall. Family reunion, the 100th family reunion. So
Gotcha.
August.
So this was in 2022, right?
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, good. So it was a massive amount of time, but it's awesome that your dad
Yeah.
was like, yeah, I want to see him, you know?
Yeah.
I hope his drive was okay. Did he drive or fly?
He drove. He said he would never drive again. He'll fly next time.
Yeah, right. I mean, it must have taken him days to get down there.
It took they did it over like a 2 day period. They took 3 days going back.
Yeah. It's a lot, man.
Getting through the Appalachian Mountains was more on pressing on them than anything. And they drove a truck, a huge pickup truck down.
Yeah, it's a lot, man. When you're doing those drives, right? I've not been through the Appalachians, I've been through the Rockies, but you know, it's not easy when you're going through mountains, right? Especially
Yeah.
when you're a little bit older and kind of going, oh, what am I doing?
He'll be 85 in October. So yeah,
God
he
bless
did
him,
all the
man.
driving.
That's amazing. And did your dad and his wife did they get the chance to see you because you also gave you're doing one of two testimonies at the time that we're recording this, but was your dad in town for one of those testimonies at your church?
No, they left the day before.
That's okay.
Didn't get a chance to see it, but that's okay. My mom
Uh,
and sister may be here for the next one.
well, I'll tell you what, we're going to share. We'll share the link to it. But share with the folks the opportunity that you got with your church down in South Carolina, right? South Carolina, that's where you're at, right?
Yep, South
There
Carolina,
you go.
Lexington. I had been talking. The lead pastor had taken a sabbatical this summer, and one of the elders had been doing a lot of the teaching. And they had another guy who's from teaches at Columbia International University, which is a Christian school here in town. He's been subbing some, but his voice keeps getting weaker and weaker. He's probably in his late 80s.
Yeah.
Really good, impassioned speaker. But then Larry, the elder, asked me, we'd had lunch and I talked about wanting to get more involved with the church. Like, he's like, I want the church to get to know you. And I said, I'm perfectly comfortable speaking on a variety of topics. So we agreed, and he asked me on Monday, hey, can you sub for the next 2 weeks? And I taught on your testimony, how to share your testimony and I shared my testimony as a part of that. And then this coming Sunday, the talk is titled I'd Rather Be a Buffalo.
Love it.
So I'm going to take some ideas and take them for a spin and see what we get out of it.
I know, right? It's all testing grounds, right?
It really is.
Well, and here you are now. The interesting thing is, because how long have you been down in South Carolina now?
Since October 1st.
Okay, so we're coming up on like 10 months now. It's about 10 months, maybe.
Yeah.
So 10 months now. And I mean, obviously, this is probably stuff that you're going to touch on in the testimony as well. But the idea of moving from Ohio and then coming down to South Carolina and going, hey, it's time for change. And, the thing that we've also talked about in our shows here, because you got that news just before December, your last months have just been about, yeah, I gotta fight this. I gotta fight this illness I'm battling, right? And so it's completely taking you out of the loop with social interactions, church interactions, any of this other stuff, because any energy that you've had has been spent focusing on, I got to do work and I got to do what I can to stay as healthy as possible,
Yes, exactly. I've been doing some like radical things, changing my diet completely, and doing fasting for up to 4 days, intermittent fasting quite a bit, and it seems to be having positive results. So I'm going to keep going forward.
Amen. How was it after you gave the testimony? You got to say hi to some people afterwards, and
I did. I was surprised the number of people came up and just started pouring their heart out to me, and some of the things that they have been dealt with in their life. And I talked a little bit about my early childhood and the trauma that I had faced. I'll talk more about that and different trials I've been through this next week. But I'm looking more this next week at 3 main points. Trauma and trials are a part of life. God works through trials and works through those that have been traumatized. And suffering can be important to transform your life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Those are my 3 main points, with some Bible to back it up, along with some of my own life stories.
I think that this is something that you and I touch on here on the show. It's obviously what we've been touching on in the book, getting it prepared. But there is something, I know it's something that I identify with. I identify with people that have gone through trials and tribulation. I have a really hard time. And believe me, I'll call it for what it is. I get one of my character defects. I continuously deal with, envy, right? I deal with envy. I deal with covetousness, right? I look at things that other people have in their life and go, how come they've got that, God? Or why does that happen? And so I say that as a precursor to this, but I just don't identify with stories where it feels like everything has just gone incredibly smooth for people in their lives, right? And I mean, that's not to take away from them, but I will tell you, particularly on the actor entertainment side, there's just been stories I've heard over the years, and I just go, you just landed in that stuff, right? I mean, and the other thing is, I always have a hard time when people don't acknowledge, like, hey, I was super lucky, right? I think one of the big things that comes to my mind, years ago, I read a Rolling Stone interview with the actor comedian Zach Galifianakis. I think that's who it is, the guy from like the Hangover movies or whatever, right? And I remember him writing about like being I was in New York City and I was in the crappy stand-up scene where you'd only get like 2 o'clock in the morning sets and you'd have to be out there, handing out pieces of paper 2 o'clock in the morning to people. And then in the next paragraph, he talks about like, so anyway, then I came out to LA and I landed my first pilot. And it's just like first pilot, pilots are basically things that an actor lands. It's a pilot run of a TV show. So usually a pilot is what a network will use as like a test to see if they're going to actually film an entire series. But it's a pretty big deal when you land a pilot. So in this interview, he talks about like from being on the street handing out, little flyers at 2 o'clock in the morning in New York to all of a sudden, like, then I moved out to LA and I got my first pilot. And you go, how did that happen? Right. It just, and that type of stuff just makes me sort of shake my head and go, and again, it's not to take away from other people's successes, but it's always the thing when I hear people go through incredible hardships and challenges to come out the other side. It's a thing that's very attractive to me whenever I hear Celebrate Recovery testimonies, right? Celebrate Recovery testimonies are mind-blowing to me because sometimes you hear people going through stuff that you go, how are you alive? Or how did you even get through the other side of that, And that's the type of stuff that ultimately ends up leading towards. And in the Christian walk, it's how did I do this? It's through my walk with Christ. That's how I got through this, But for me, hearing the story, and coming back to the people coming up and talking to you afterwards, after you'd given your first lesson this last weekend, there's something that people identify with. It may not be exactly your challenge, but it unlocks something where people just go, hey, I've gone through that too. Hey, I identify with that too. And it gives a talking point, right? Whereas it's not like we're trying to approach somebody that's absolutely perfect or has it all together, or somebody that's going to turn around when we talk about our those areas of our life where we have shortcomings, that somebody's not going to look down their nose at you and just go, what's wrong with you? But
good reason to stay off social media.
I'll tell you, buddy.
That's all we see is the good. We never see the struggle.
Or I have to tell you this too, like this has come up for me recently. You sure get a lot of brave people that love to hide behind anonymity, right? Or people that love to say or to do things that you go, yeah, you'd never do that to me in real life, would you?
Exactly.
There's a guy that I follow. His name is Eric July. He's a independent comic book creator. And, this guy tends towards the conservative side, but he's ruffled some feathers in the comic book industry because he's kind of done like, as much as the comic book industry has made a decision to go a certain path to address certain, ideals that are out there in society right now. And it's kind of cost them economically. Eric July comes along, he's a black guy that's just like, I like making comics and I want to start telling the stories that I want to tell. And anyway, he started his own independent comic book company. It's called Rippaverse, Rippaverse, Rippaverse. And he's made like almost $1.5 million, $2 million in sales from 2 comic books that he's got that are out there.
Wow.
Anyway, my point with this is that here's this guy that's been this independent comic book thing, and he gets so much flack and hate and all these other people that keep just like, trolling him online, on YouTube, on Twitter, and all this stuff. And he was going down to Comic-Con down in San Diego, and some guy had made some threats, if I see you, I'm going to punch you, or you better watch yourself, whatever. And, he went down to Comic-Con and he just went, nothing happened. Nobody's, he said, actually, I ended up meeting a really bunch of nice, really awesome people, but people love to talk. They love to talk smack so much more instead of like actually having the courage to go, are you going to sit in the room with me and have the uncomfortable conversation? And are we going to have the back and forth? where it doesn't turn into a, "Wah," so anyway, I'm really glad that you got that opportunity for people to come up and just say hi to you and make connections, right,
And make
dude?
connections. That's what it was all about for me. It was really good.
It's like a little answer to prayer, right?
It was a huge answer to prayer because I wanted to get to know people at church better. And what greater way to do that than to be up front? Now, I don't remember all the names of everyone I met.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but in time, I'll figure it out.
Of course. Huge blessing, buddy. I'm
It's
super.
just a weird thing for me. I can do up front on the stage. We probably have 250 people at church, 300 or so. And yet I can only do one-on-one. I can't do like 3-on-1 or 5-on-1. It's so much out of my comfort zone. I just tend to withdraw and listen. I don't participate, but one-on-one I'm good at,
That's good.
or 300-on-1.
Yeah, it's almost like you'd really have to do you know what it's like? It's almost like I heard Jordan Peterson would do this when he was on his tours. He would usually have like a little pre or post one-on-one meetings with people, so it would be like if people were in a line or whatever to kind of meet, he'd do stuff where he'd make sure like he had like 10-minute conversations with people that would wait. It's almost like you want to do that, right?
Right.
To kind of go, hey man, let's hit some high level stuff, just try to talk just one-on-one. wait in the line and we can do it. I get it, dude. When you're in those party situations and trying to like juggle anybody and everybody,
The worst.
it's a lot. I did it once for Kate's 40th birthday. I thought, well, I'm gonna have a surprise party for her, and I brought in. I think there were 40 people for her 40th birthday, but they were from 3 very different areas of her life. Right, one was like from work, one was a bunch of theater people that we knew, and then the other one was a bunch of people from her, growing up in childhood. So it was like 3 different gaps, and she just said, thanks for doing that, but it's too much. It's just like you just had so many people, And again, that's the thing that you kind of talk about in the book, about coming back to Ohio and there's sort of a surprise party, right?
Yes, that's the first thing that came to mind. I'm like, I remember picking up my friend Tina had just given birth to a baby. Her name was Nissa. I picked her up, and then my knees started to go. I'm like, this has never happened before. I'm just give the baby back before I drop the kid or pass out myself.
It's interesting though, and especially since you've come from a background of wanting to. I've got some other friends that deal with exactly the same issue. They're introverts that are comfortable in what people would call extrovert situations, right? So yeah. I know several actors that are introverted people, but then when they get on stage, they're just like, hey, I'm cool. I can do all this stuff here, but then when it comes to the stuff off stage, I'm just like, and there's a little bit of that with you because you just loved theater, especially when you were a young guy. And it was almost the direction that you went in with your career to kind of go, great, I'm going to do this. Was it the fact that you could kind of escape or just be somebody else, or what was it?
I could be somebody else. I could put a little bit of me into it. The part of me I don't share with people. People who know me one-on-one, I can carry conversation for hours.
Mm-hmm.
But still be comfortable with silence. My best friend and I, good example of that. Drove all the way to Hilton Head and back a couple weeks ago, and just we had times of silence, times to listen to music, times of just talking.
Yeah.
But we never have to start at the beginning. That's the nice thing with closer friends. We can just go deep immediately. We don't have to start beneath the surface level stuff that I can only talk about the weather or sports for 5 seconds and I'm done. No, and I can't talk about sports for more than a second.
Well, I think that's also the important thing that happens when you have that faith connection as well.
Yeah, exactly.
With a believer, right?
Yeah.
I remember listening to a guy. There's a guy, I forget, he's a Scottish guy, and he runs a thing that's called the Fuel Project. but he gives such a great example of that, like exactly what you're talking about. Like, in a way, believers have such an inside track. Like, you can meet somebody, and if you can really suss out, like, oh, you truly believe in Jesus Christ, it's like, great, we can go way down deep into much deeper things and to talk about deeper things that have happened in our life, like right away, instead of having to do sort of the, the blind date kind of, what do you like? And, oh, I like this,
Yeah.
So it's good, Doug. I hope that there's more. I hope that this just leads to more and more, opportunities and chances for you to develop and grow some friendships and fellowship down there. Because I think that'd be huge.
I just have to be careful because the pastor, Ross, he and I were the last to leave. We were just catching up and talking, and he's like, might have to put you on the teaching rotation. Like, don't know about that.
Yeah.
But as we were talking about things I wanted to talk about, he's like, you've got about 5 talks there already.
Yeah.
Like, let's start with 2.
Yeah. I mean, listen, and I totally get that. That happens in any organization, right? When you show proficiency skills, it's oddly enough, it's a season that I'm in right now, because I've got some, won't talk about it yet here on the show, but there's some changes and stuff that are coming up for our family in the relatively near future. And so there's been a shift that's been happening for me where the recovery program that I'd gone to for a long, long time, being in the teaching and all that stuff, had to, say goodbye from it. It was quite a distance away from my house to begin with. And now I'm just sort of I'm in an interim time where I still get the opportunity to go to another recovery program that's near me. But again, having that moment of going, yeah, I can't, right now I'm in a season where, I know where my service lies. I know that my service lies in the work that we're doing here, on some other work that I'm doing with my other projects, and with my relationship with Kate and with my boys, and to just go, hold it, man. That's where my service lies. And it can really happen, especially when you show proficiency and skill in that, that you can have, other people that want to kind of go, oh, we need you for everything,
Yeah.
And that's okay. It's just, it's just recognizing where you're in and where the most importance is, right? Where, for example, yourself, your health, your other stuff you're working on, listen, you've obviously had some challenges here, which you've announced. We can talk about this a little bit or not talk about it, because you just announced it on LinkedIn today. So there's a little bit of a change that's also going on with Orphan World Relief. So, do you want to share a little bit of that, or?
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. After 15 years of serving orphans, foster, refugee, and at-risk kids around the globe, it just became time to sunset the organization. The economic reality of running a nonprofit in this environment has hit us hard.
Yeah.
So we've lost, donations, we've lost opportunities to raise funds. COVID took a huge hit to us. We're still recovering from that, post 2020. And we just made the decision as a board to sunset it. Finding the right staff who are willing to work for very little and even part-time, is also a challenge.
Yeah.
I'd rather have someone passionate about it, not just someone good at it.
Yeah.
And finding those two in combination is tough.
Yeah. No, it's a big challenge, man. So with all this done, I know it's part of the stuff that you announced on LinkedIn as well. I mean, obviously there are other organizations that Orphan World Relief was able to help as well. So the biggest thing that you're telling people to do is to, again, go off and to send your money and your donations to those organizations, which can, continue that good work.
Exactly.
Where do you get, and listen, I'm putting you on the spot with this. You don't have to answer this at all. What's been rolling around in your heart about all this? Like I mean, obviously the biggest thing, which we've been talking about continuously here on the show, is about your health. Is there any other ideas that are sort of rolling around in your head, or maybe it's just this stuff that we're doing with I'd rather be a buffalo. I don't know.
Yeah, there's a sense of relief not having to worry about how to shore up a nonprofit
Mm-hmm.
since I can't be there physically to do the work. I probably would have, because I had some staff who, to their own, benefit, they want to spend more time with their families.
Yeah.
Even though it was like, 10, 15 hours a week, they wanted to spend that time with their families. And I'm like, had I been in Ohio, I would have just jumped back in. And so this is part of what I think God was doing with me all along, helping me to step away and step
Yeah.
down in
Yeah.
order to focus on, I'd rather be a Buffalo
Yeah.
and focus on my new church. I've
Yeah.
got some opportunities now to do more. And I'm looking forward to doing it without having my time divided.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sliced. Yeah, I get that enough at work all day long.
Listen, man, I think I had exchanged this email with you over the last week or so, but one of the biggest mind shifting books that I read over the last few years was a book called Essentialism by Greg McKeown. And you got it right there, right? And it's like that book is so big, and that book is really about saying no. That book is about saying no to everything that's, oh, I think I want to do this. I love the example that he gives in the book, which is like to give a percentage to what it is that you think that you want to be doing, right? And it's like, oh yeah, I have this idea about trying to do something. It's like, well, what percentage do you feel like you want to do? It feels like it's about a 70% thing. And when you say that out loud, it sounds like, oh, that's 70%. That's like more than half. That's great. But the example that he gives in the book is to go, yeah, what if that was a grade on a college paper, right?
Right.
And, and sometimes there's some decisions that you're making where you're kind of going, I feel like 60% like doing that. It's like, that's a D minus. That's a D minus life decision that you're doing. And I love the way that he puts it. It's so funny that I'm saying this. You and I will talk a little bit offline about some stuff I dealt with this last week. Doug and I always have some offline conversations to go. Let's talk about some other stuff that I don't want to air in public right now. But I'm saying this out loud. I'm saying this out loud right now about a situation that I was just involved in, and just going, yeah, I don't want to make a D minus life decision here. I want to be doing stuff that's 90% or above, which I go, this is it. This is my wheelhouse. I need to be doing this. And you know what, man? I needed to be saying this out loud for myself today, because I think I was talking to my wife about it earlier. I think that I'm sort of in a season where I know that I feel like God is testing a lot of stuff that's happening. I think he's refining a lot of stuff that's happening for me. And I think he's trying to help me to get very, very clear. First and foremost, I'm making sure that I am inviting him into every step of the way with it. Mm-hmm. And that anything that I'm doing is about deepening my relationship with him, right? And not trying to put these other things into my life as idols, because it's very easy to do that. We can it's so easy to get caught up and say, yeah, but I'm doing this good thing. Isn't this thing a good thing? And yet that good thing can become an idol. And this can happen in marriages, families, the work that we do. I'm doing a good thing, but we've done it a good thing where we've literally also alienated ourselves from an intimate relationship with God. And I feel like I think that that's what's been going on with me. And I have this moment where there's some stuff that I want to do and that I'm striving towards. But it's definitely not easy. Every step of the way is definitely not easy. To which I had a conversation with my wife today. And again, it's the whole idea of like going, those things are good. They truly don't come easy. There's some work and effort that's behind it. There's a reason for it. If it was super easy, everybody would be doing it, and then it wouldn't have the value or the meaning behind it. So anyway, I'm just kind of glad that came. I think that that's the thing. Is like I've had so much stuff that's just been like stripped out of my life in a good way. Because I think when I'm younger, so much of this is about like, yeah, I want to do that. Oh yeah, that sounds good too. Oh yeah, sure. I think that that's such a North American thing of like, yeah, yeah, sure. We automatically do that, especially here in California. That's the first thing that we just, yeah, 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 yeah. That's great, buddy. Just going, come on, man. You got to think it through. So,
Yeah. You got to learn to take the 14-15 option, as I call it. 14th letter of the alphabet and the 15th letter, N and O.
I love it, man. It's that. I think it has to be that different. And listen, I come from a different background where it's like I had I think I had too many no's when I was growing up, right?
Mm,
I had too many no's because I understood, my parents were playing it safe with, you know, being Irish immigrants. And listen, we were in Hollywood in the 70s and 80s, man. It's not necessarily a safe place.
right.
Drugs, prostitution, crime, like not good, right? Um, and so, parents trying to raise kids in an environment like that, and being parents from another country and being in an atmosphere like that, and like going, hey, can I go out? No, 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 right?
Right.
So I had a lot of that growing up. So I think I went the opposite route with like going, I'll say yes to anything, and can't do that either. Can't do that either. So, um, any other thoughts, buddy, that's on your mind that you want to share with folks this week?
No, you were just talking about those idols in our lives, and I was just reflecting back. I did 8 years doing divorce care at my church in Columbus, and the one thing I realized, parents make their children into idols,
Yes, they do.
and when those kids have grown up and moved out of the house, they have no way of focusing their adoration. They're not doing it to God, and their source of focus is gone, and they get divorced. I
Yes.
saw that a lot. And that's why I kept warning parents who were still together. I'm like, hey, your kids are growing up now. What are you going to focus on? Hopefully it's God.
Yes. And I do believe this, especially in relationships. This is something that Kate and I have learned. And I got this from my friend David Burke. But, you know, if both people in the relationship are focusing on God, then you're both focusing towards the same central point, which means you're both heading towards each other.
Exactly.
Both heading towards each other. But you got to have God in the center of it. Because if you don't, you're screwed. You
Yep.
know, and it's exactly that. I always put that order of things of like love of God, care, physical care for myself so I can be the best that I can, then my wife, then my kids, then friends. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It has to go in that hierarchy. And way too many times in my life, it's part of the reason I ended up in recovery programs and therapy. Too many times I had crazy dysfunctional relationships way down here that started acting like screaming 2-year-olds that even got more attention than God, you know? So it was like
Yeah.
a tantruming. I had extended dysfunctional relationships in my life that acted like a kid that had sliced their finger with a knife and screaming bloody murder, right? And so it was just like, oh, we got to put out that fire, and you spend all that attention, and then you start learning when you start feeding that fire, those dysfunctional relationships love it, and they feed on it, and they want
They
more
do.
attention, right? just like a
Exactly.
just like a tantruming 2-year-old, they want more and more attention, and they'll scream and scream and scream. And it took me a long time, it took me a couple of decades before I went, oh, this is nuts. Giving you all of my attention and focus is killing me. So, you know. Anyway, well, Doug, thank you again for sharing your heart. I hope that your next testimony goes excellent, and that you make even deeper relationships and get to have more one-on-one time with folks. So enjoy it, brother.
I will.
Well,
Thank you.
yeah, we'll definitely put a link to that one, to the one that Doug just did, and then next week's we'll do that in the next video as well. But go check it out. Take a click, and then you get to hear a little bit of, you get to hear what Doug's story is and some of the stuff that he's gone through. For more of our stuff, including our free 1-month gift journal, head over to I'dRatherBeABuffalo.com and sign up so that we can let you know about great stuff that is heading your way. Thanks for joining us. Hit like and subscribe, and also share this with friends if there's somebody out there that you know that would enjoy it. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye now.
See y'all.